This KFAN podcast is sponsored by Builders and Remodelers, exclusive Twin Cities provider of Elements Windows. Get the highest quality windows at unmatchable value. Visit buildersandremodelers.com for more details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Guardsy, I am beginning to be increasingly concerned about the health of my league, the National Basketball Association.
No.
Got further evidence of it late last night and early into today. I come today in praise and defense of an Indiana Pacers guard named Tyrese Halliburton, who last night, I think, despite the fact that he only scored 14 points, by the way, in 23 minutes, was instrumental in the Pacers extending the series to 7 games, the NBA Finals to Game 7, Sunday evening in Oklahoma City, and is further proof that this league's got to get off of ESPN as quickly as possible. Because instead of celebrating the best of Halliburton and trying to analyze the game beyond the fanciest of plays, the most dominant of scoring totals, it's clear that a lot of their folks can't or don't want to. I mean, can I give you his line if the numbers matter to you? He ends up with, as I said, just 14 points, but in 23 minutes, 5 assists, 2 steals, only 1 turnover. If you care about plus minus, he was plus 25. And instead, on ESPN, of appreciating, and by the way, it wasn't just him. It was definitely an ensemble victory for the Indiana Pacers. That's what makes them what they are at their best. But this peculiar inability to accept there are different forms of greatness, and that when you're celebrating the Indiana Pacers, it doesn't have to be about, you see their superstar players, they just take the thing over. What? Instead, it's, well, I don't even know if I can call Halliburton a star. Who cares? They've just gotten, by the way, they've been last night they won for the 10th time as an underdog in an NBA playoff game this year. They win one more, the title, they will break the all-time record. And instead of concentrating on what he did well to orchestrate, what he brings to a game, which when he's going good, is not simply about scoring, but managing, doing other things, getting other people involved, the ESPN folks are just obsessed with, well, but has he really had any signature plays beyond the game-winning shot in Game 1?
It's a pretty big play, by the way, if you do want to reduce it to just that.
That's also true. But how did we get to this place where this is how we analyze professional basketball? It's embarrassing. It makes no sense to me. In fact, to celebrate, we have one of the more entertaining and important sequences. This was, I think, second quarter.
Oh, yeah, hang on.
If I'm not mistaken.
I gotta pull it up.
Oh, okay, sorry. I should have warned you. Quarter number 2, this involves a Halliburton steal, and then he actually, I think, gets fouled as he's controlling the ball near midcourt. To the whoever made the decision among the referees to not call the foul, God bless him, because it would have ruined the aesthetic of what was to come next, which was Halliburton, dribbling further down the court, turning his head and whipping a terrific no-look, just a gorgeous no-look pass to, I think it was Siakam.
It was.
For a dunk. We happen to have that play as broadcast in Portuguese and then Korean. At least I think you'll see, at least in the case of these broadcasters, they get it. Let's listen.
Pontos de vantagem. Halliburton tenta roubar. Rouba a bola. Faz o passe com Siakam. Pascal! Siakam bota alguém. Bridgefield raus abaixo.
혼란스러워하고 있는 오케이신데요. 수비 할리버튼.
Pontos de vantagem.
I went back to Portugal.
Why do they get it?
They love it.
And we don't.
They see it coming.
But what's his handle? What's in his bag of tricks? It is as the weeks go by, it's bugging me more and more and more. As I said, today I thought they haven't won the title, but I'm thinking, all right, so today's going to be a celebration of a really impressive Pacers victory on the road, I should say at home, and a dominant victory. Right? To say, well, every time people think it's over for this magical Pacers run, all they do is extend it. And they haven't won the title yet, but now they have extended this series to 7 games.
Anything can happen, Game 7.
Anything can happen. And how did they do it? And what does that say about them? And are they winning a different way? There's so much there to explore, right? And believe me, I get it. Some of the juicy stuff, the battles of the egos that go on, the battles between coaches and players. I love that stuff too. I'm not saying there's no place for it. I'm just saying that I'm scratching my head, and a lot of this has to do with who the analysts are, right? Because not all of them, I'm painting with too broad a brush when it comes to ESPN, but let's face it, it's the show business aspect of it. And I would say, even if you want to do showbiz, you can still attempt to acknowledge the basketball that you are seeing and have fun with that as well, rather than debating. The one what was the one you heard before the game?
Yesterday, I was sitting in this chair watching SportsCenter during a break, I assume. And the question to Stephen A. was, if Indiana loses tonight in Game 6, what's your takeaway? Now, how does that make any sense on any given level?
And by the way, this isn't on First Take.
No.
This was...
I was sitting in this chair watching. It had to be
Pre-game.
SportsCenter or whatever their pregame show is.
Right.
If Indiana loses tonight, in the game that hasn't been played yet, that we don't even know what Halliburton's deal is.
They need better producers. I'm convinced that's a lot of it.
I do think...
With greater vision and creativity than, let's see, what's the dividing point that can kind of get people going and you can debate.
But how do you have a takeaway for a game that hasn't even happened yet? I don't know what the takeaway is. I haven't watched.
And some stuff isn't even worth debating. That's true. The thing. You can make decisions about what's worth debating and what isn't. And then what did I hear this morning was the debate was, even if the Pacers win it this on Sunday, they don't look like, I wouldn't say they're the favorite for next year. Who cares? Enjoy the moment. Seize it. And that, again, doesn't mean you can't be critical of anything that takes place or analyze, but I think it's feeding on itself, and it cannibalizes the game in a way that I think is really, really destructive and really boring. And yet I think you condition enough people to think, well, that's what they're supposed to be debating, because that's what I'm used to hearing in these debates. So, yeah, let's have a debate about what level of star Tyrese Halliburton is. Right now, it's strange to me, unfortunate to me. By the way, a couple of people said, just tuned in, couldn't have been more confused by those announcers. Well, I was just looking for the emotion of it, right?
Yeah, we didn't need you to follow dribble by dribble.
No, and we laid out right before that we were just trying to make the point that those were, I think, both very entertaining calls of that moment, those moments in the game. And
I want to find them on the iHeart app.
We probably could
make it a preset.
It wouldn't be. Now, I asked you this question before. I don't think they are often at the game. I think a lot of these individuals, some are in a studio,
right?
And somebody said that they thought the Portuguese crew was not there. To which I say I applaud them, because they made it sound like they were courtside. Did they not?
Yes, even better. Sometimes they have room for international crews, depending on their press box situation in different areas for them. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
when the Olympics happen, a lot of that happens in a studio in Connecticut, right? Where they don't even send people to the Olympic site. So you do the best you can. But those, you wouldn't have known it, like you said. Felt like they were right there feeling the emotion.
Whatever happened, I think I asked this last week, whatever happened to, in our analysis of players, analyzing them on the basis of, can they help you win?
Do they win?
Do they bring things to the table beyond whether they've got, what's in their bag? What's their handle? How about, well, if you put this player on such and such a team, does he bring something that might give them a better chance to win? Not everybody has to be a superstar to do exactly that. It's getting worse for me all of the time, and there's no answer. I mean, ESPN's not going anywhere, right? I don't think like ESPN's going to put out a press release Monday due to some criticism we've received in the Twin Cities market. We've had taken a long, hard look at ourselves, and we are going to completely reinvent the way we go about exploring and analyze NBA basketball during the playoffs.
Unlikely.
Seems unlikely.
Very unlikely.
All right. We're going to get a lot more serious in the next few segments. As I mentioned for the last couple days, Andy Luger, kind enough to join us in studio. He is going to hit Studio A in just a minute. A lot of ground to cover with him, obviously, on some very, very serious subjects. If you have questions for him, hit the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line at 64686.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Back in a minute.
And
as I mentioned before the break, Andy Luger, kind enough to join us in studio. This is for the second time, and obviously these are very difficult circumstances. Welcome back to the studio, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Two-time U.S. attorney, and now, well, maybe we'll talk about it eventually, what you're moving on to next, although we got into a little bit of that the last time you were in studio. So let's just start at the beginning. As difficult as this story is to discuss, I think there is a lot of ground you can help us cover, especially with your experience and your thoughts. How did you first hear of the nightmare that quickly ensued over the last weekend?
Saturday morning, I got a text from somebody, not from law enforcement, because I'm not there anymore, but from somebody else who knew what had happened, just telling me the basic facts, and early Saturday morning. And, you know, I two things. One, like many people, I was in a fog the rest of the day. I knew Melissa. I knew Mark. Not nowhere near as well as other people who you'll talk to or have talked to, but I did. And I respected them both. And then I was in a fog because I imagined all of the things that were happening that I was not a part of. And, you know, it's very difficult to not want to weigh in and say, make sure you look at this.
Sure.
Make sure you do that. Although they didn't need me, obviously, for any of that. But it's a bit of a surreal experience not being in the room, which I was, you know, twice now as U.S. attorney for so many tragic matters, cases, murders, where you can at least play a role helping people. All I could do is sit with my thoughts.
And as the day goes on, are you someone who needs to stay connected to the story constantly? You're looking, watching the news, or are you someone who almost wants to or needs to walk away from it?
Yeah, I couldn't walk away. It's a good point, and maybe in the future I will, or if I don't know the people involved, you know what? I should take that back. I'm not. I need to be on it. You do what I did for enough of these tragic moments, it doesn't get out of your system.
I was trying to think for me the moment when, you know, the story breaks, and at first we don't know the condition of those who've been wounded. And so there's in the back of your mind, I think, that human thing that goes, well, this is awful, but maybe they've survived this. And then I actually got a phone call from somebody who, right before the press conference started, said the worst, what they were about to say in the press conference about Melissa and her husband, Mark. And for me, for whatever reason, that just changed everything. Because then there's that finality about it. You just sort of hang your head and say, here we are. There's no turning back on this story. There's no way to put anything rosy on this story because everybody, despite these efforts by an assassin, has survived. To me, that's what took it to another place.
Yeah, I mean, there's no other way to describe it for me other than tragic. And, my mind goes back immediately, as it did here. You don't compare tragedies. Each one is just so horrific on its own. But when the 3 officers in Burnsville were shot, I got the immediate call and text about this is happening in Burnsville, and then what happens after that, and what law enforcement and what prosecutors do. That all flooded back in my mind. I can talk about others. I don't really want to compare them, but there is no going back. A tragedy is a tragedy, and then hopefully, you can sort of begin to think about what does this mean, and what can we all do? You're home, you're hopeless, you're helpless. There's nothing you can do, but you gotta all start thinking, what can we do about this? And other than mourning the loss of great people, what else can we be doing? And I try to do that in each of these instances. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I'm very successful, but I try.
I was in the summer of 1968. I was 13. I think you were a bit younger, 3-4 years, right? Mm-hmm. 68.
Yeah.
I was very much aware and old enough to pay attention because my family tended to pay attention to these sorts of political things anyway. The assassination of MLK and, of course, RFK as well. The degree to which the country seemed torn apart. And I don't know what your memories were of that, but there's the age-old question of, is this just tragically more of the same, or are there is there something different about these conditions that means we're in a completely different place than we were then? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. We are in a different place. Not to minimize the horrific assassinations in the 60s and into the 70s, actually, with the Weather Underground and the bombings. And Patty Hearst and some of the things.
Yeah.
That was a terrible time in a lot of respects. I think what's different now is social media, the internet, and the ability to communicate hate so easily and so quickly. And I want to take a step back also, Dan, because we don't know precisely yet what motivated this guy. And I hate to ascribe motives, although there are certain things that seem apparent. Mm-hmm. I want to be careful because each instance, the school shootings that we've seen, each tragedy in America that we've seen, some obvious, some not, for the motivation, always take a step back before you ascribe, this is what this person was doing. At the same time, we're clearly at a point where we're communicating differently with each other than we've ever done before in the history of this country or the history of the world because of social media, the internet, and the way we can talk to each other without talking to each other.
Do we, in your view, hate more, or is it just that we are front and center facing the hatred because I've told my producer, Justin Gard, about this before. There was a time where if something really venomous or hateful was said, it might be said at the end of a bar, and you're down 3 stools down, and you hear it, and the other 5 people in the bar hear it, and that's all who hears it. Now that same person has the megaphone of it gets out on X, everybody grabs onto it, and so the assumption is we hate more now. Do we really hate more now, or is it just it's easier for us to see what our fellow man is paying attention to, and that actually turns out to be very unhealthy for all of us?
I think it's more the latter, but a little bit of the former. We can clearly see what everybody's thinking because all you got to do is type a few words and hit send or hit a button. I think we ramp each other up by virtue of social media and the internet, and the way to get friends, or whatever the term is for the social media you're on, the way to get likes or friends is to be outrageous. And I think, we can talk about this or not, but, having been U.S. attorney doesn't give me any benefit or any great insight versus anybody else. I just happen to have my views. I think we have to take control of this thing that we created and find a way to, become civil or demand civility or demand something other than what we have now. Not wait for our leaders to do it, not wait for every politician to say the right words, and many of them are, and that's great. But I think there's more to this than saying somebody else needs to do something. And so is there a way for us to kind of take hold of our social media, take hold of all of our blogs and websites and what have you, and lift up the level of discourse? Not easy and maybe impossible, but that's where I think we have to go. And it's not just political rhetoric, it's everything. Because yes, we see it in the politics, and we see it in the politics of hate and the politics of denouncement. But look, it's trivial to raise this, but you guys were just talking about the level of criticism for a star basketball player who won a game. I think in a tiny way that's symptomatic of the way we're conversing with each other, and that's the way to get noticed. And I've begun, and it's not always met with favor, I've begun in parties and conversations when somebody goes down that route to just stop them. And I literally say, stop.
Do you really?
Yeah.
How does that go over?
Not always well. Dan, I may find myself with nobody other than you to talk to someday. But I really want us, and I don't want to be preachy about this. I just want us to find a way to really strongly disagree. And that's great. And even bash each other up a bit, but without taking it to the level that we have. And we've always been a contentious society. Yeah. This isn't brand new, but I think it's getting away from us.
All right, let's make this the bottom of the hour pause to stay on schedule. Andy Luger, kind enough to join us in studio. We've got a lot more ground to cover. I know you say you did not know Melissa Hortman. You weren't best friends, but you did have experiences with her, and I want to get into some of that as well, and some aspects to the charges as they're laid out now, and even some aspects of the role you have, how important in a situation like this as U.S. Attorney, in terms of bedside manner, to explain to the victims and victims' families in terms of what they're dealing with here as well. So a lot of ground to cover. We have some time to do it. We'll continue in just a minute here in the Fan. Andy Luger, we've got a thing called the Bradshaw and Bryan KFAN text line, 64686. I'm sure you've texted in many, many times under assumed names. That wouldn't surprise me at all. And we're getting a bunch of texts responding and reacting to our conversation thus far. I do want to run a couple of them by you before we get to some other things of note regarding a very obviously serious and difficult conversation. And I'll give you an example. This is Mark from Moorhead. He writes, censorship is not the answer. It's a heart problem. And there are a couple other people who say, well, whoa, wait a minute now. You're talking about managing and controlling. How are we going to pull that off in a country that allegedly feels pretty strongly about the First Amendment, et cetera? So how do we thread that needle?
Yeah, this is, when I say we've got to manage it, I don't mean government. I mean, we as individuals need to call each. So was it Mark from Moorhead?
Yes.
So I didn't mean anything about censorship. I am a strong advocate of free-flowing ideas. I just think, like I do personally, in my relationships, I call people out when I think they're out of line. And I'm not on social media very much.
Congratulations.
Yeah, believe me. But I do, I peek, and then I also see the news about social media. And so when somebody says something that's outrageous, that maybe gets them a bunch of likes, is there a way for others to kind of weigh in and say, look, I hear where you're coming from, but maybe say it a different way or tone it down? Again, I haven't figured out the answer.
Right.
I don't think the answer is government, and I don't think the answer is, quote unquote, our leaders. I think the answer is us. And we used to talk to each other. Now we talk with each other online. How do we figure out what to do with that so that we can be more humane, still maintain our very, very strong views and all of that?
Let me ask you, this will probably be viewed as a political question, but you can take it any way you want. A lot of people believe, whether you're the folks who are listening are pro-Trump or not, that everything changed with Trump's ascension, that something fundamentally changed in the discourse, the way we went about our business, the way politicians even went back and forth, that was different than whatever had come before. Almost the theory is, once upon a time, there might have been a filter that said, I may be thinking that, but I can't say it. And that filter was gone. And it's like, no, go ahead and say, what are you going to do to you? Can't do anything to you. So do you buy that theory?
Not really. I get that. And I get, the differences in tone and substance. But you can go way back. Under George W. Bush, I remember people just railing against him and, the Iraq War and this and lies. And I understood. I just felt like, this is George W. Bush. This isn't Satan. People were talking in a different way. And then I saw it under President Obama. Mm-hmm. And we saw sort of weird and bizarre conspiracy theories about him that I wish more people would have just said, oh, stop that. The birther thing and other
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
It's just, I loved, and it's a moment in time and it's gone, I suppose, when John McCain stood up at a rally and said, no, he's not this and he's not that. He's just a guy and he's a family man and I disagree with him. Can you imagine that today? So I think it goes back further. I also do really think the internet, like I said to you before, I don't like to sound old, but there was a time when we had to talk to each other. And if you wanted to say something really horrific, you had to actually look at the person and say it. And we did. But now, and so how do we control that, not by government and not by leaders, but us individually? What can we be doing? And I don't have the answer.
Well, what do we do have, though, people in elected office, and they have presumably some influence. They certainly have, one would hope, a place for all the obvious reasons. So what, without, again, I know you worry about getting preachy, and that's not your intent here, but I'm asking you, what do they need to do? Where do they fit into this, and what steps can they take?
Well, first of all, I think everybody can stop calling each other names, for gosh sakes. So you're a Democrat, you're a Democrat. You're a Republican, you're a Republican. They're within the Democrats. I'm a moderate Democrat. So I get accused, the biggest accusation against me by people further to the left is that you're really a Republican. Like, okay, strike me down and I'll die on the street. And then there are people, people do that in each side, whatever. Look, I am who I am. I'm a moderate. I've said this in Democratic meetings. I don't agree with you on a bunch of things. That doesn't make me bad. And the fact that you believe in those things doesn't make you bad. It just means we disagree. I use the term disagree a lot in these conversations because that's what we're really doing. And rather than calling it a disagreement, we got to label each. Look, I'm going on. You didn't call me
why
here
is
for
a
this.
moderate? Why is a moderate a bad word in 2025?
If you're further to the left, you're suspicious of moderates. They're going to do this, they're going to do that, and
compromise too much,
and just not go in the direction you want them to go. Right. So, I'm against some people on the left who I don't agree with. I don't call them, I try not to call them names. I just don't agree with them. What's wrong with that?
There shouldn't be anything wrong with that. But I mean, all right, well, I'll ask you one other question on this, and I want to get back to the story at hand, because to a certain extent, though, I think this is all somewhat related. The last time we talked, I thought, and maybe something's changed and I've missed it, that you don't really have many run for office plans right now. Is that correct?
I have none.
You have none. So do you have none in part because of this climate?
No. Or
a feeling of, I'll be spinning my wheels here because the way I'm identified just isn't, it's I'm not as electable as I feel like I should be. Yeah. What is it that's driving the position you've taken? Because the last time we had you on, I will tell you, after you left, we got a bunch of texts from people who identified themselves actually as righties. This might hurt you with some of the Dems, who said, God, that guy gets it. I could listen to that guy. I don't feel like I have to sort of, put my hands over my ears to say I don't want any part of that. And there's a lot of that we get. And I think that's partly how you conducted yourself when you were in office as well. Here, I'm not trying to, get in your campaign, but I think that will frustrate people to say, well, why not?
Because I want a new generation to do it. We often talk about time for new leaders and time for younger blood and new blood to come in.
You are young compared to Trump and Biden.
Thank you. But there's really two things. One, I firmly believe that this country, our city, our state need a new generation of leaders. I want to support them. I want to help them. I will be doing that. I am doing it, and I will continue. And sometimes you just got to put your beliefs in front of maybe your ego or whatever it is. So you asked me, did I think I couldn't win? I didn't get that far. And I would never admit on the air I couldn't win something. Although there may be something to that. So one, I just want people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. I want people we don't even know yet. I want them stepping up. I don't want to be in the way of that. That's number one. Number two, I've said this many times, maybe not on this show, but when I became U.S. Attorney, I believe, and it's just me, but I believe that somebody in that position should not leave the job and run for office. I think that it causes suspicion and it causes questions about why you did what you did. And so I said to my office multiple times, because there were all these rumors, I'm not running for office. I'm not bringing these cases. I'm not holding press conferences because I want to build my name for my campaign. I don't believe in that. And I want the integrity of the work that we did when I was U.S. Attorney to stand on its own.
That's fair. That makes some sense. Let's come back to the story itself. And I mentioned that you did have, maybe even can tell us about the first time you spent time with Melissa Hortman.
So it was about 20 years ago. She was newly elected to the House, and I was gearing up to run for county attorney the one time I did run. And I asked a lot of people, because I was new to the political game, who do I talk to? Who do I listen to? Who should I seek support from? And even though she had just been elected, her name came up over and over and over again. So I called her and I said, you don't know me. I don't know you. I'm going to run for county attorney. I could use input and advice. And she had worked in the county attorney's office. And so I sat down with her and again, never saw each other before, didn't know anything about each other. We hit it off. And right there on the spot, she said, I like you. I like what you have to say. I'm going to support you. We maintained a loosely termed friendship over the years. I met her husband, Mark, at a social gathering that neither of us wanted to mingle at. and we ended up in a corner, kind of plotting a business venture that I long ago got forgotten, never went anywhere. It was one of those things where you're talking to somebody and you're hitting it off and you're kind of riffing on each other. And I remember going home and telling my wife, we got this great idea. And by the next morning, I don't even remember what it was, but he was that kind of guy. And I really enjoyed him. And then over the years, we would just see them casually. Wonderful people.
Wonderful people.
Yeah.
And part of what I also wanted to get into regarding this particular story in this case is, I know you can imagine yourself dealing with this sort of case because of the cases that you did when you were still U.S. attorney. So how do you view the role of a U.S. attorney if he or she is doing the job correctly at a time like this as it pertains to, I hate to use the term bedside manner because I don't even know if it fits, but in attempting to do the job, get the charges, pursue them, et cetera, investigate, but also what component of this is the human side as it pertains to victims, families, et cetera? What was your general rule of thumb in that regard?
My rule of thumb, and I think it's true in the county attorney as well as the U.S. Attorney's Office, my rule of thumb was you meet with the families as many times as they want, as often as they want, and answer and we did this over and over and over again, and answer questions. Sometimes it takes half hour, sometimes it takes 3 hours, because we work. What I always said to people is, I work for you, and I can't undo what happened here, but I can bring justice. And so ask me everything. Don't censor yourself. Don't think something stupid. And people ask very insightful questions, and they just want to know. So whether it was carjacking victims, victims of other types of violence, fraud victims, we would always just sit and talk. And you do that a lot because our system of justice owes that to everybody. And then you go out in the community, not during the pendency of a case because you can't affect the jury, but you talk about the reality of these crimes in a humane way.
There's been much discussion. I believe the Moriarty's office had said, or she has said, that she has been in touch with she has the desire to have a chance to pursue the local case before the federal case. What is the rule of thumb on that? I know you're not in the middle of this. I mean, it strikes me that, without any legal background, that it would make more sense at the highest level, the most serious charges, the federal charges, be the ones that get pursued first for all the obvious reasons. But how does that usually play out?
It plays out with everybody reaching agreement, and that's what's going to happen here. They'll sit down and I've been through that topic multiple times, going all the way back to the late 80s when I first became a prosecutor. It's normal to have that kind of who goes first, and I want this and I want that. That'll all get worked out behind the scenes, sitting around a table with all the right players involved. It's natural to want to go first. It's natural to want your office to do what your office does, because that's why you're there. I would be surprised if people didn't feel that way. It'll get worked out. I've had dozens of those conversations.
Well, at the risk of editorializing too much, I would be
Is there a risk that you're going to do that?
There might be. I would firmly be in the camp of allowing the feds and Joe Thompson to go first, because I, quite frankly, do not have that much trust in Mary Moriarty when it's come to several cases that have played out in the last several years. Because everything I see, and you know Joe Thompson very well, you can speak to him, is that he is attempting to follow whatever you had established and set up in that office, and that you feel pretty strongly about how he goes about the job.
No, he's doing an amazing job. So Lisa Kirkpatrick, Joe Thompson, Melinda Williams, Alan Slaughter, Tom Calhoun Lopez. There's a leadership team there that I picked and that flourished when I was there. They're all still doing their jobs, and they're excellent, and they're dedicated public servants. They're in it for the right reason. Mary has a similar team in place, and we all work together. I understand your criticisms, or what you said, editorializing, but the fact of the matter is she's got great prosecutors who know what they're doing and will prosecute this case appropriately. The U.S. Attorney's Office does as well, and the law enforcement agencies work with both. It's going to get worked out, and what I would say to the people listening today, of all of the issues to be thinking about, I think that's pretty low on the priority list. Just because I lived through so many of these discussions, it just gets resolved.
Anything in particular that struck you regarding the charges as we know them to this point, as someone who's been in the position to, to sort of write those out and develop them?
Yeah, there's a little bit of and it's really unfortunate and it's tragic, but we now have a little bit of a template for someone stalking people to murder. And the first one in recent days was the United Healthcare case in New York. So as I was kind of contemplating all this on the tragic day it happened, I imagined a set of charges from the U.S. Attorney's Office that would be along those lines, and that's what happened. And I imagined that the county attorney would do exactly what they did, which was second-degree murder charges. The tragedy is we're now seeing basic templates come up that we didn't have really before.
Where does the death penalty option factor in here? How does that play out?
In a number of ways. So the decision will be made ultimately by the Attorney General of the United States. There's a special committee that exists across administrations. They do this. I've dealt with that committee on occasion. And one way it could factor in is, and I assume people have talked about this, if there's a recommendation to impose the death penalty, that could lead the defendant, to want to plead guilty to life imprisonment without parole. And then everybody's got to make decisions about that. The death penalty has without getting into whether I believe in it or not, it's available here. And ultimately, the Attorney General will make that decision. When
you read the text that I believe was sent to the wife of the accused, Daddy went to war last night. No. What did that tell you?
I can't tell exactly what the mind. I mean, obviously, you can call him all the appropriate names that people have. I don't know what triggered this for him, and one of the reasons I like to get a plea out, and that one of the cases that I have in mind is the Wetterling case, where the family in that case and the community and the state really wanted to know what did you do and why did you do it, because it had been so ingrained in our memories and in our psyches. I think it would be helpful personally for people to know what happened here. Why did you do this? Well planned out, and a kind of bizarre communication with your family and with friends too. So really quite thoughtful not in a good sense, thoughtful and planful.
Yes.
And
in a calculating sense. So
the notion that there's some sort of insanity defense or anything I hear to me has pretty much been wiped out. So why are you saying these things, and why did you feel you needed to go to war? What was it? And we may never know, but I always want to know.
Is it, do you accept the theory, do you worry about the theory that suggests that once a certain threshold is passed, like this, a man goes to the homes of 4 different state legislators, and with murder on his mind, and succeeds, unfortunately, in at least 2 cases, same family, obviously, that there's a dam bursting concept of this, that it then makes it easier to worry that the next one almost has, the next person who thinks along these same lines now feels like he or she has permission to do it, and that it can start, I don't want to call it, an epidemic exactly, but it makes the next one easier. Do you buy that?
No, I don't. I mean, I understand why people think that. We don't really have a lot of evidence of that in history. So it's a concern. People raise it.
Sure.
The copycat term is used, and there are definitely times. I don't think a dam has burst here. I think one significantly flawed individual with horrific ideas and plans has carried them out. I've seen so much tragedy in my career that, trafficking and child abuse and sexual exploitation of children, murdering people just to make a buck. I've seen, a wide gamut. I don't think, even as public as this was, I don't think this leads to more on its own. That's just my view, and you can get 80 texts that tell you I'm crazy.
We get those all the time. That doesn't mean you're wrong. Top of the hour break. We'll do one more shorty because I know you got to leave. We really appreciate the time. Former U.S. Attorney Andy Luger in studio with us. We'll get back to one more segment with him.
Okay, have you heard about this? Last year, Degree changed the formula for their Cool Rush deodorant. Their fans rebelled and wanted the old scent back. And Degree listened. That doesn't happen often.
They admitted that they effed up and are bringing the original Cool Rush scent back. And it's exactly how you remember it. Cool, crisp, and fresh. There's a reason it's the #1 men's antiperspirant, and it's back in Walmart, Target, and other stores for under $4.
So try it and see what the fuss is about. Head to your local stores to try the OG Cool Rush for yourself.